For 10 years, my daughter never called on my birthday, not once. At first, I waited by the phone all morning, then until lunch, then until midnight. Eventually, I stopped waiting. I told everyone birthdays didn't matter anymore, but that wasn't true. Every year, I'd bake the same small vanilla cake my late wife used to make. I'd place 2 plates on the kitchen table out of habit, even though I always ate alone. My neighbors thought I had accepted the silence. I hadn't. I simply learned how to hide disappointment. Then, on my 75th birthday, a single envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp from anyone I recognized. Just 5 handwritten words that stopped my heart. Dad, please read this alone. My hands began to shake before I even opened it, because deep inside, I already knew. Whatever was inside that envelope was about to explain 10 years of silence. My name is Thomas Walker, and until 10 years ago, birthdays were the happiest days in our family. My wife, Margaret, never allowed them to pass quietly. She believed birthdays weren't about getting older. They're proof, she used to say with a smile, that God gave us another year together. She decorated the house with cheap paper streamers, baked homemade cakes that leaned slightly to one side, and somehow made even ordinary dinners feel like celebrations. Our daughter, Emily, inherited that same excitement. When she was little, she woke before sunrise every birthday. She would sneak into our bedroom carrying handmade cards covered in glitter and crooked hearts. One year, she proudly handed me a card that read, "Happy birthday, best dad in the world." She had misspelled world. I never corrected her. That card stayed in my wallet for nearly 20 years. Emily wasn't spoiled. She wasn't perfect, but she had the biggest heart I'd ever known. She loved helping Margaret in the kitchen. She insisted on wrapping my presents herself. Most years, the wrapping paper had more tape than paper.
Please give it a like, subscribe.
Most years, the wrapping paper had more tape than paper. I'd pretend it took me 5 minutes to open it. She'd laugh so hard she'd fall onto the couch. Those sounds. I thought they'd last forever. Then life began moving faster. Emily left for college in Chicago. The house became quieter. Margaret and I missed her terribly, but we were proud. She studied journalism. She dreamed of writing stories that mattered. She called every Sunday, never missed one. Even after she graduated, even after getting her first apartment, even after meeting the man she would eventually marry. Her voice still filled our home every week and every birthday. She came home. Sometimes only for dinner, sometimes just for cake, but she always came. Until the year everything changed. Margaret was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctors tried to stay hopeful. Margaret stayed stronger than all of us, even during chemotherapy. She worried more about Emily and me than herself. One evening, while I sat beside her hospital bed, she squeezed my hand. "If anything happens to me," I interrupted immediately. "Don't." She smiled softly. "Tom, listen." I couldn't. I wasn't ready. She waited, then continued anyway. "Promise me one thing." I nodded through tears. "Never let Emily think she has to choose between her own life and taking care of you." I laughed bitterly. She'd never think that. Margaret looked at me for a long moment. "Promise." Reluctantly, I did. 3 months later, I buried the love of my life. The house that had once echoed with laughter suddenly became unbearably quiet. Emily stayed for 2 weeks after the funeral. She cooked meals, organized paperwork, sat with me on the porch every evening without saying much. Before leaving, she hugged me tighter than ever before. "I'll never leave you alone, Dad." I believed her, because she had never broken a promise, not once. I had no idea that life sometimes breaks promises for us. The first birthday Emily forgot was my 66th. At least that was what I told myself, that she had simply forgotten. People forget things. They get busy. They lose track of dates. That morning, I woke before 6. For a few seconds, I didn't remember what day it was. Then I saw the small red circle on the calendar beside my bed. October 14th, my birthday. Margaret had always circled birthdays in red. After she died, I continued doing it myself. I don't know why. Maybe because changing that small tradition felt like losing her all over again. I showered, shaved, and put on the blue shirt Emily had bought me the previous Christmas. Then I went downstairs and made coffee. The house smelled the way it always did in October. Cold wood, cinnamon, and the faint scent of leaves drifting in whenever the back door opened. At 7:30, I checked my phone. No messages. At 8, I checked again. Nothing. I reminded myself that Chicago was an hour behind. Emily was probably still asleep. At 9, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, 1 strip of bacon. I set the table for 1, then stared at the empty chair across from me. Margaret's chair. Even after a year, I still couldn't bring myself to sit there. At 10, the phone rang. My heart jumped. I nearly knocked over my coffee reaching for it. "Hello? Thomas Walker?" A woman's voice, not Emily. It was the pharmacy reminding me about a prescription refill. I thanked her and hung up. Then I laughed at myself, a quiet, embarrassed laugh. By noon, I had received calls from my sister Ruth and 2 old friends from church. My neighbor, Mrs. Green, brought over banana bread. Everyone remembered. Everyone except Emily. At 1 in the afternoon, I finally called her. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart," I said after the beep. "It's Dad. Just checking in. I hope everything's all right. Call me when you get a chance." I did not mention my birthday. I wanted her to remember on her own. At 3, I convinced myself she was planning a surprise. At 5, I told myself she was working late. At 7, I heated a frozen dinner. At 9, I turned off the porch light. At 11:58, I sat in the dark living room holding my phone. 2 minutes later, the date changed. October 15th. She had forgotten. I went upstairs without turning on the lights. The next morning, she called. I saw her name on the screen and answered immediately. "Emily?" "Dad, I'm so sorry. Yesterday was insane." My heart waited for the rest, the apology, the realization, but it never came. "We had an emergency at work," she continued. "Then Michael's mother came by and I completely lost track of everything." I sat on the edge of my bed. "It's all right." "Are you sure? You sound tired." "I'm fine." There was a short silence. Then she said, "I'll call Sunday, okay?" "Of course." She hung up. She still hadn't remembered. For the rest of the day, I carried a strange heaviness in my chest. Not anger, not exactly. More like grief. A new kind of grief. Because when someone dies, you know why they're gone. But when someone is still alive and slowly disappears from your life, you spend years wondering what you did wrong. That evening, I took Margaret's old recipe box from the kitchen cabinet. Inside was her vanilla cake recipe. The card was stained with butter and sugar. In the corner, she had written, "Tom's favorite. Emily likes extra frosting." I sat at the table and held that card for a long time. Then I baked the cake myself. It came out uneven, Too dry on one side, too soft in the middle. I spread frosting over it anyway. I placed one candle in the center, not 66, just one. I lit it. Then, in the empty kitchen, I whispered, "Happy birthday, Tom," and blew it out alone. I thought that would be the only year. I was wrong. After that first forgotten birthday, something changed between Emily and me. At first, the change was small, almost invisible. She still called on Sundays, but sometimes Sunday became Monday, then Monday became Wednesday. Eventually, whole weeks passed. Whenever she called, she sounded rushed. There was always noise in the background, traffic, a television, someone calling her name, a door closing. She would ask how I was, but before I could answer honestly, she had already moved to another subject: work, bills, her husband, Michael, their plans to buy a house. I tried to be understanding. She was building a life. That was what Margaret had wanted. Never make her choose between her own life and taking care of you. So I said the same things every time. "I'm doing well. Don't worry about me. Take care of yourself." Even when none of it was true. Emily and Michael had been married for 4 years by then. He was a good man as far as I knew, polite, hardworking, quiet. He worked in commercial construction and often traveled. I never felt close to him, but I never disliked him either. Emily seemed happy. That should have been enough. The following Christmas, she didn't come home. She called 2 days before. "We're spending it with Michael's family this year." I paused. "Of course. We'll come in January." "That sounds good." They didn't. In March, she sent flowers for the anniversary of Margaret's death. There was no handwritten card, just the printed message, "Thinking of you, love, Emily and Michael." I placed the flowers beside Margaret's photograph. They were beautiful. White lilies, Margaret's favorite. But for some reason, they made the house feel even emptier. My 67th birthday came. This time I did not dress up. I did not wait by the phone all morning. I told myself I had learned. But at 7 that evening, I still checked the screen every few minutes. At 10, I called Emily. No answer. The next day, she texted, "Sorry, Dad, long week. Call you soon." She did not mention my birthday again. That was the year I stopped reminding her. Not because I stopped caring, because I cared too much. By my 68th birthday, I had created a routine. I bought a small cake from Miller's Bakery, I made coffee, I visited Margaret's grave, then I drove to the lake where we used to take Emily when she was little. There was a wooden bench beneath an old maple tree. I sat there with a thermos and watched the water. That became my birthday tradition. No party, no candles, no waiting. At least, that was what I told people. But every year, just before midnight, I checked my phone one last time. And every year, there was nothing. During those years, I assumed Emily was simply too busy for me, that she had moved on, that I belonged to a part of her life she no longer needed. What I didn't know was that Emily's life had begun falling apart. The first sign came when she called me one winter evening. It was nearly 11. Her voice sounded strange, thin, tired. "Dad? Emily? Is everything all right?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like you're failing at everything?" I sat up in bed. "Of course. Everyone does." "No, I mean really failing. Talk to me." I heard her breathing. For a moment, I thought she was crying. Then a man's voice sounded in the background. Michael. Who are you talking to? Emily answered quickly. My dad. Another silence. Then she said, I have to go. Emily. The line went dead. The next morning I called her. No answer. I called again that evening. Nothing. 2 days later, she texted, I'm okay, just tired. I wanted to drive to Chicago. I even packed a bag. But I remembered my promise to Margaret. Don't make her feel she has to take care of you. I told myself showing up uninvited would make things worse, so I stayed home. It is strange how easily love can disguise itself as restraint. Sometimes we think we're giving someone space, when really, we're allowing them to disappear. Months passed. Emily called less. When she did, she sounded guarded. One day, I asked about Michael. She said he was fine. I asked about work. She said it was busy. I asked whether she was happy. She became quiet. Then she laughed, a short, unnatural laugh. What kind of question is that, Dad? A father's question. I'm fine. There it was again. The same lie I had been telling her for years. I'm fine. Maybe families don't fall apart because they stop loving each other. Maybe they fall apart because everyone keeps saying they're fine. By the time my 75th birthday arrived, 10 years had passed since Emily had remembered it. 10 years, 120 months, more than 3,000 days. Long enough for hope to become habit. Long enough for pain to become part of the furniture. That morning, I did what I always did. I woke early, made coffee, put on my coat, visited Margaret's grave. The cemetery was quiet. The maple trees had turned red and gold. I brushed a few leaves from her headstone and sat beside it. 75 today, I said. I had started talking to her years earlier. At first, it felt foolish. Eventually, it felt necessary. I thought Emily might call this year. I looked down and smiled sadly. I know. I say that every year. The wind moved softly through the trees. I placed a small bouquet beside the stone. Then I said something I had never said before. Maybe I lost her too. The words hurt more spoken aloud. I stayed there until my hands became cold. Then I returned home. Mrs. Green had left a card under my door. My sister Ruth called from Florida. 2 men from church invited me to lunch. I declined. I said I was tired. The truth was, I didn't want anyone to see how much the day still affected me. At 4 in the afternoon, I went outside to check the mailbox. There were 3 envelopes, an electric bill, a church newsletter, and a plain white envelope. My name was written on the front, not typed, written. Thomas Walker. The handwriting looked familiar, but older, less steady. There was no return address, no stamp. Someone had placed it directly in the mailbox. I carried it inside. For several minutes, I left it unopened on the kitchen table. Something about it frightened me. Then I turned it over. On the back were 5 words. Dad, please read this alone. My hands began to shake. I sat down. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages. The first line made it difficult to breathe. Dear Dad, if you're reading this, then I finally found the courage to tell you why I disappeared. I stopped, read it again, then continued. I need you to know that I never forgot your birthday. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the table. Never forgot? 10 years, 10 silent birthdays, 10 years of believing I no longer mattered. I forced myself to keep reading. I remembered every single one. I wrote you a letter every year. I bought cards. Sometimes I even drove halfway home. But I was ashamed to face you. My eyes blurred. You always believed I had a good life. I wanted you to keep believing that. The truth is, my marriage was not what it seemed. I put the letter down. For several seconds, I could hear only the clock on the wall. Then I continued. Michael never hit me at first. He didn't need to. He controlled the money. My phone, my email, my friendships. He convinced me I was unstable. He read my messages before I sent them. He listened to my calls. When I talked too long with you, he accused me of turning you against him. My stomach tightened. I remembered the late-night call, the man's voice, the fear in hers. The first year I missed your birthday, he had taken my phone. The second year, he told me you had called him and said I was a burden. I believed him because I was already broken. I stood so quickly the chair fell behind me. No, I whispered. I had never spoken to Michael about such a thing, not once. I returned to the letter. Every year I wanted to call. Every year he reminded me how disappointed you would be if you knew the truth. He said you would blame me for staying. He said Mom would be ashamed of me. I covered my mouth. Margaret. He had used Margaret's memory against her. I know silence hurt you. I know there is no excuse for 10 years. But Dad, I wasn't living. I was surviving. The next line was smudged, as if tears had fallen on the page. 3 months ago, I left him. I read that sentence over and over. I'm staying at a shelter outside Chicago. I have no idea what happens next. I don't know whether you can forgive me. I don't know whether I deserve it. At the bottom of the final page, she had written, But today is your birthday, and for the first time in 10 years, I don't want fear to decide what I do. Then came the final sentence. If there is still a place for me in your life, look outside. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I turned toward the window. There, at the end of my driveway, stood a woman holding a small suitcase. Her hair was shorter. Her face was thinner. She looked older than 40. She looked tired, terrified. But she was my daughter, Emily. The letter slipped from my hands. I opened the door. Neither of us moved at first. 10 years stood between us. 10 birthdays. 10 Christmases. 10 years of things left unsaid. Then she whispered, Happy birthday, Dad. And I ran to her. I don't remember crossing the driveway. I only remember holding her. She collapsed against me like a child. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I held the back of her head the way I had when she was little. No, I said through tears. You're home. For the first time in 10 years, my birthday did not end in silence. That first night, neither of us slept. Emily sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never drank. I sat across from her, afraid that if I looked away, she might disappear again. For a long time, we said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked loudly between us. At last, Emily looked toward the photograph of her mother. She would have known something was wrong. I followed her eyes. Margaret was smiling in the picture, standing beside the rose garden she had planted 20 years earlier. She usually did, I said. Emily lowered her head. I kept thinking about calling her. The word struck me harder than I expected. You mean before she died? Emily nodded. I knew things with Michael were already changing. Not as bad as later, but enough that I felt uneasy. Mom asked me once whether I was happy. What did you tell her? The same thing I told you. She gave a broken smile. I said I was fine. I looked down at my hands. For years, I had blamed Emily for not seeing my loneliness. Now I understood that I had failed to see hers. Not because I did not love her, because I had accepted every easy answer she gave me. I had heard the strain in her voice and chosen not to press. I had told myself I was respecting her marriage. I had told myself she needed space. I had told myself so many things that allowed me to remain safely at home. I should have come for you, I said. Emily looked up immediately. No. I should have driven to Chicago after that late-night call. You didn't know. I knew enough to worry. And if you had shown up, I might have defended him. Her voice was quiet but certain. I was ashamed, Dad. I had spent years telling everyone my marriage was good. I didn't know how to admit that I had lost control of my own life. I reached across the table. You did not lose control. Someone took it from you. She looked at my hand but did not take it. Sometimes I still feel like it was my fault. It wasn't. I stayed. You survived. I stopped calling you. You were afraid. I let 10 years pass. I waited until she met my eyes. And you came home. That was the first time she reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. We sat there holding on to each other until the tea went cold. Near midnight, I carried her suitcase upstairs. Her childhood bedroom was almost exactly as she had left it. The old quilt Margaret had made still covered the bed. A shelf held school trophies, faded photographs, and a ceramic horse Emily had painted when she was 12. She stood in the doorway and stared. You kept everything. I didn't know what else to do with it. She walked slowly to the desk and picked up a framed photograph. It showed the three of us at Lake Michigan. Emily was 15, sunburned and smiling. Margaret had one arm around each of us. We look happy, Emily whispered. We were. She pressed the photograph to her chest. I don't remember the last time I felt safe. I wanted to promise her that she was safe now, but I knew safety was not something another person could simply declare. It had to be learned again. So I only said, you can stay as long as you need. Emily nodded. Then she closed the bedroom door. I returned downstairs, but I still could not sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard a sound above me, a chair scraping, then quick footsteps. I climbed the stairs and found Emily standing in the hallway, breathing hard. What happened? I heard a car. I listened. Outside, an engine moved slowly down the street, probably someone returning from a late shift. But Emily was trembling. He used to park outside after arguments, she said. Sometimes he would leave for hours. Then he'd come back and sit in the driveway until I apologized. I stepped toward her carefully. Michael does not know you're here. He'll find out. Then we'll deal with it. Her eyes filled with fear. You don't understand what he's like when he feels humiliated. No, I said, but you don't have to face him alone. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to wake me during thunderstorms. Then she walked into my arms. I held her until the car disappeared and the street became quiet again. The next morning, Emily received a call from a woman named Rachel Monroe. Rachel worked at the shelter where Emily had been staying. Emily put the phone on speaker. Did you get there safely? Rachel asked. Yes. And your father? Emily looked at me. He opened the door. There was a pause. I'm glad, Rachel said. Her voice carried the kind of warmth that comes from hearing many stories that do not end well. Rachel asked Emily whether she had brought her documents: birth certificate, driver's license, social security card, bank information, medication. Emily opened her suitcase. Inside were a few clothes, a folder, and a small wooden box. That's everything, she said. Rachel told us that Michael had already called the shelter twice. He claimed Emily was mentally unstable and had disappeared during a breakdown. He knows how to sound reasonable, Emily said. They often do, Rachel replied. Do not speak with him alone. Do not meet him. Save every message. Then Rachel asked to speak with me privately. Emily handed me the phone and walked into the living room. Mr. Walker, Rachel said, your daughter may seem calm today, but the next few weeks could be difficult. I understand. She may change her mind. My grip tightened around the phone. About leaving? Yes. Why would she go back? Because leaving is frightening. Familiar pain can feel safer than an unknown future. I looked through the doorway at Emily. She was standing beside Margaret's photograph. What should I do? Do not shame her. Do not control her choices, even when you're afraid. She has had someone making decisions for her for years. Support her, but let her lead. It was harder advice than it sounded. I wanted to fix everything, call the police, hire a lawyer, change her number, move her somewhere Michael could never find her. But all those decisions belonged to Emily. Rachel continued. She may also apologize constantly. She already does. Remind her that she is not a burden. After the call, I found Emily in the kitchen. She was washing the same cup for the third time. Rachel told you I might go back, didn't she? I did not lie. Yes. Emily placed the cup in the sink. I won't. I hope not. She turned sharply. You don't believe me? I believe you want to stay. Her face tightened. That isn't the same thing. No. She crossed her arms. For a moment I saw anger in her. Real anger. I was almost relieved. She had spent so many years swallowing every feeling that even anger felt like evidence she was still alive. I left him, she said. I drove 3 hours alone. I stood outside your house not knowing whether you would even let me in. I know. I'm not weak. I didn't say you were. You looked at me like I might disappear. I let out a slow breath. Because I'm afraid you will. The anger left her face. I continued. I spent 10 years wondering whether I would ever see you again. I'm going to be afraid for a while. Emily looked down. So am I. That was the truth we could both live with. Neither of us was certain. Neither of us was fully healed. But for the first time, we were afraid together instead of alone. That afternoon, Emily opened the wooden box she had brought from Chicago. Inside were 10 birthday cards, one for every year she had been gone. They were not arranged neatly. Some were still sealed. Some had been opened and folded again so many times that the edges had softened. She placed them on the kitchen table in order. The first card was from my 66th birthday. The front showed a fishing boat at sunrise. Inside she had written, Dad, I know today matters. I know Mom would have made your cake. I wish I could come home, but things are difficult right now. I'll explain soon. I love you. The second card was shorter. Happy birthday, Dad. I almost called. Please forgive me. The third said, I dreamed about Mom last night. She asked me why I had not gone home. The fourth was never finished. The fifth had only one sentence. I miss being your daughter. I had to stop reading. Emily sat across from me with tears running silently down her face. Why didn't you send them? At first, Michael found them. What did he do? He laughed. Her voices became distant. He said they sounded pathetic. Then he tore one in half and told me you were probably relieved not to hear from me. I stared at the cards. And later? Later, I hid them. Why not mail them from work? Because by then I had missed too much. She wiped her face. Every year made the next year harder. I kept thinking I needed to explain everything perfectly. I thought if I couldn't explain, I had no right to contact you. You never needed a perfect explanation. I know that now. She pushed the last card toward me. It was the one she had written 3 weeks before returning. The front showed a simple white house with a porch light glowing in the dark. Inside, she had written, Dad, I do not know whether home is still a place I am allowed to return to, but I need to try. I closed the card carefully. Then I stood and walked to the small cabinet near the dining room. Inside was a metal box containing Margaret's important papers and family keepsakes. I removed an old, worn card, the one Emily had made when she was 7. Happy birthday, best dad in the world. She laughed through her tears. You still have that? I carried it in my wallet until it almost fell apart. She held it beside the newest card. The handwriting was different. The woman was different. But the small heart beside her name was exactly the same. I thought I lost you, I said. Emily looked at me. You almost did. The honesty hurt, but I was grateful for it. Because healing did not begin with pretending the past had never happened. It began when we stopped protecting each other from the truth. 3 days later, Michael contacted her, not by phone, by email. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table when the notification appeared. I watched the color leave her face. The subject line read, Please come home. She did not open it. For almost an hour, she stared at the screen. Finally, she asked, Will you sit with me? I pulled my chair beside hers. The email began gently. He said he was worried. He said the house felt empty. He said he had not slept. He said he was sorry for everything she had misunderstood. Emily stopped reading. Misunderstood, she repeated. I said nothing. She continued. Michael wrote that he forgave her for leaving. He said they could start over. He promised counseling. He promised separate bank accounts. He promised he would never check her phone again. Then the message changed. He reminded her that she had no job, no money of her own, no health insurance. He said her father was old and could not support her forever. He wrote, You are making decisions based on emotion. Come home before you destroy both our lives. Emily closed the laptop. He always does that. Does what? Starts like I'm the person he loves and ends like I'm a child who can't survive without him. She stood and paced the room. What if he's right about one thing? Which thing? You can't support me forever. That is not a reason to return. I need work, insurance, a place of my own. You will find those things. What if I don't? You found your way out. She stopped. That was different. No, I said. That was the hardest part. She looked toward the window. I used to be good at my job. You still are. You don't know that. I know you. Emily laughed bitterly. You knew the person I was 10 years ago. The words landed between us. She was right. I wanted her to become the young, confident woman I remembered. But she was not that woman anymore. She had survived things I had not witnessed. Her recovery would not be a return to the past. It would be the creation of someone new. I want to know who you are now, I said. Emily looked at me for a long time. Then she reopened the laptop. She forwarded Michael's email to Rachel. After that, she blocked the address. Her hands shook while she did it. But she did it. 2 weeks later, Emily applied for a position at the local newspaper. It was not the kind of job she had once dreamed about. The paper was small. Most stories covered school board meetings, road repairs, local businesses, and high school sports. Still, when they invited her for an interview, she stood in front of the bedroom mirror for nearly an hour. She changed her blouse 3 times. What if they ask why I haven't worked in 4 years? Tell them what you're comfortable telling them. What if they think I'm unreliable? Then they're wrong. She turned to me. You make everything sound simple. No, I just make it sound possible. That made her smile. I drove her to the newspaper office. She asked me to park around the corner. I don't want them to think my father brought me. You are 42 years old. I know. She opened the door, then paused. Will you wait? As long as it takes. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When she returned, I could not read her face. Well? I forgot the editor's name halfway through. That happens. I dropped my pen. Also happens. I told them I had been out of work because of personal circumstances. That was honest. They asked me to write a short article as a test. That sounds promising. She looked out the window. It's about the town's volunteer meal program. Margaret had volunteered for that same program for 12 years. She would like that, I said. Emily nodded. The article was due the next morning. She worked at the kitchen table until after midnight. At first, she deleted every paragraph, then rewrote it, then deleted it again. Finally, I said, "Read it aloud." "I'm not finished." "Read what you have." She did. The article was about elderly residents who received hot meals from volunteers, but it was not really about meals. It was about dignity, about how loneliness could hide behind closed curtains, about how one knock on the door could remind someone that they still belonged to the world. When she finished, the kitchen was silent. "That's good," I said. She looked at me suspiciously. "You have to say that." "No, I'm your father. I'm allowed to lie about your cooking, not your writing." She laughed. A real laugh. The next afternoon, the editor called. Emily got the job. It was part-time. The salary was modest. There were no grand assignments. But after she hung up, she cried harder than she had the day she came home. Not because the job solved everything, because it proved Michael had lied. She could still work. She could still think. She could still create something valuable. That evening, she bought dinner with money from her emergency savings. 2 hamburgers and a slice of chocolate pie. "It's not much," she said. "It's the best meal I've had in years." She rolled her eyes. "You said that about my pancakes." "I was being polite about the pancakes." She threw a napkin at me, and for a few minutes, our kitchen sounded like it used to. One Sunday morning, Emily and I went through Margaret's old clothes. I had avoided the closet for 10 years. Her dresses still hung in the same order. Her winter coat remained on the last hook. A faint trace of her perfume still clung to one scarf. Emily held it to her face. I forgot this smell. We filled 2 boxes for donation. At the back of the closet, I found a small suitcase. Inside were photographs, receipts, handwritten recipes, and letters. One envelope had Emily's name on it. The handwriting was Margaret's. Emily froze. When did she write that? I don't know. The envelope had never been sealed. Emily opened it carefully. The letter was dated 1 month before Margaret died. She read it aloud. My dear Emily, there are things a mother knows even when her daughter says nothing. Emily stopped. Her voice broke. I reached for her hand. She continued. I do not know what is happening in your marriage, and I will not force you to tell me before you are ready. But I have seen fear in your eyes. Please remember this. Love should never make you smaller. Emily covered her mouth. The room seemed to close around us. Margaret had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Emily kept reading. Your father may not always understand quickly. He is stubborn, proud, and sometimes too quiet. But there is nothing you could tell him that would make him stop loving you. I laughed through my tears. That sounds like her. Emily nodded. The letter continued. If one day you feel lost, go home. Even if years have passed, even if you believe you waited too long. Home is not a reward for people who never make mistakes. Home is where you are allowed to tell the truth. The final lines were almost impossible for Emily to read. And if I am no longer there, tell your father I said to open the door. Emily folded over the letter, sobbing. I held her. For 10 years, that message had waited in a dark closet. Margaret had written the words Emily needed before either of us understood how much she would need them. After a while, Emily whispered, She brought me home. I looked toward the empty side of the closet. Yes, I said. I think she did. 3 weeks later, Emily received the official court date. It was the first time she would see Michael since the morning she had left. She folded the letter twice before setting it on the kitchen table. I don't know if I can do this. I looked at the date. You don't have to do it alone. She nodded but didn't answer. The night before the hearing, neither of us slept much. Around midnight, I found her sitting on the back porch. She was staring into the darkness. What if I freeze? She asked. You won't. What if I believe him again? I thought carefully before answering. Then look at me. She turned toward me. When he starts rewriting the past, look at me. I'll remind you what really happened. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Michael was already there. He looked exactly the way I remembered. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect posture. If someone had met him for the first time that morning, they would have believed he was the kindest man in the room. He noticed us immediately. His smile widened. Emily. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. You look tired. Still nothing. I've been worried about you. Rachel had warned us this would happen. He would act concerned, never angry, never threatening, only reasonable. Emily kept walking. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed the paperwork. There were no children, very few shared assets. The divorce itself was straightforward. What complicated everything was Michael's attempt to portray Emily as emotionally unstable. His attorney spoke calmly. Mrs. Walker experienced significant emotional distress after the death of her mother. My client believes she has misunderstood many events over the past several years. Emily lowered her eyes. I could see her hands shaking. Then her attorney stood. Without raising his voice, he presented photographs, medical records, bank statements, copies of threatening emails, witness statements from the shelter, even the unopened birthday cards. The courtroom became silent. The judge looked directly at Michael. Is there any reason your wife felt unable to contact her own father for nearly 10 years? Michael hesitated. Then he gave the same answer he had always given. I was only trying to protect our marriage. The judge closed the file. Control is not protection. For the first time since entering the building, I saw confidence disappear from Michael's face. Less than 20 minutes later, it was over. Emily walked out legally free. She stopped on the courthouse steps and closed her eyes. The wind moved gently through her hair. She took one long breath, then another. I forgot, she whispered. What freedom feels like. Healing did not arrive all at once. It arrived in ordinary mornings. Emily began working 4 days a week at the newspaper. She covered community events, school concerts, charity fundraisers, small stories that most people ignored. But she wrote them beautifully. People started recognizing her around town. You're the reporter who wrote about the veterans. My wife loved your article. My mother cried after reading your story. Each compliment surprised her. One evening, she came home smiling. My editor gave me a permanent position. I knew he would. No, you hoped. I've learned those are almost the same thing. She laughed. For the first time in years, the sound filled the house. Little by little, our routines returned. Sunday breakfast, walking through the park, visiting Margaret's grave every month. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we simply sat together. Neither of us felt the need to fill every silence anymore. One afternoon, while trimming the roses Margaret had planted years ago, I felt a sharp pressure across my chest. I leaned against the fence. The shears slipped from my hand. Emily looked up from the porch. Dad? I tried to answer. The words wouldn't come. Within seconds, she was beside me. She called an ambulance with remarkable calm, held my hand the entire time, never once let me think I was alone. At the hospital, the doctor smiled reassuringly. It wasn't a heart attack. Emily closed her eyes in relief. But it was a warning. Mr. Walker needs to slow down. She laughed through tears. I've been telling him that for years. The doctor smiled. Now he has to listen. When we returned home, Emily quietly removed the ladder I used to clean the gutters. She hid the heavy toolbox. She even hired the neighbor's son to mow the lawn. I can still do those things. I know. Then why? She smiled. Because now it's my turn to worry. For the first time, our roles had changed. The little girl who once needed me to cross every street had become the woman making sure I reached home safely. Another October arrived, my 76th birthday. I woke expecting another quiet morning. Instead, I heard laughter downstairs. The kitchen was full. Ruth, our neighbors, friends from church, even the editor from Emily's newspaper had come. Emily walked toward me carrying the same chocolate cake my wife had baked every birthday for nearly 30 years. I had the bakery use Mom's old recipe. I couldn't speak. Everyone gathered around the table. Emily handed me a wrapped box. It wasn't large, just heavy enough to make me curious. I opened it carefully. Inside was a wooden frame, 10 birthday cards, every single one she had never mailed. They were arranged side by side beneath a single photograph of the two of us when she was 8 years old. Below the cards was a small brass plaque. It read, "Love never stopped. It only lost its way. 2016 to 2025. I couldn't hold back my tears. Emily stepped closer. "I wanted you to know you were celebrated every birthday, even when I wasn't there." The room was completely silent. Then I stood up and hugged my daughter, longer than ever before. No words. None were needed. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Emily and I sat on the back porch. The sky was filled with stars. She handed me one final envelope. "I wrote this yesterday." I opened it. Inside was only one page. "Dear Dad, for 10 years I believed coming home would only remind you of everything I had done wrong. Instead, you reminded me of everything love does right. Thank you for opening the door without asking where I had been. Thank you for never making me earn my place back. Most of all, thank you for waiting. Happy birthday. I love you. Emily." I folded the letter slowly, then looked toward the porch light. "You know," I said, "your mother always left that light on whenever you stayed out late." Emily smiled through tears. "I remember." I asked her once why. What did she say? I looked at the glowing light above our heads. She said, "Children should never have to wonder whether they can come home." Emily rested her head on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke again. The porch light burned quietly into the night, just as Margaret had always wanted. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is not chasing someone who has lost their way. It is simply leaving the light on until they find their way home. Before you go, I have one small favor to ask. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like, and share. See you soon.